welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. Today, I am so excited to have this legend. Even though she said to get over it, she is still a legend in my books. So let me break it down for you who we have on today. She has done it all. I mean, when I say she's done it all, she's done it all. And she still wants to do more. She's a designer. She's an educator. She's a historian and mentor who has helped shape the past, present, and future of design. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great Gail Anderson with us on the podcast today. Gail, thank you so much. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. I'm doing okay.
Good.
So
Okay.
I'm upstate right now. You caught me on a Friday, so I'm much more relaxed than I would be.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for coming on the podcast. So let's just jump into it. So you've had an incredible career spanning editorial design, Broadway advertising, and education. Can you take us back to the beginning? What initially drew you to design?
I loved to make things when I was a kid, and I didn't know what design was because it was called commercial art back then, and was, I suppose, thought of more as a trade than a profession. And I just wondered who made things. And I was making awful posters and little magazines and all kinds of silly stuff. It's like, well, how do you do this when you grow up? A book that we had at my high school at Cardinal Spellman in the Bronx was called Careers in Graphic Design. And it was like, design. Is this what this is? And that led me to School of Visual Arts. I was actually taking drawing classes at Pratt when I was in high school in Pratt, Manhattan, and because of my art teacher. And then she'd been taking calligraphy classes at SVA.
Oh, wow.
And said, oh, you should go there. And I was like, okay. And I knew I wanted to go to art school. And I wish I'd hoped to have gone to an art high school as well, but my parents weren't having it. And I get it in retrospect now, especially because that's many, many years ago. But it was, a wise decision on their part. But getting to go to an art school was eye-opening. And to go from being, the kid in your high school class who was the good artist to be one of lots and lots of good artists was quite humbling. Yes. And I realized, like, wow, I've really got up my game now. And I had a great communication arts teacher in freshman year at SVA who just sort of taught me so much. And I'm lucky that I knew the lane I wanted to be in from really early on, where others are, figuring it out in their 20s and 30s sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, I just knew I wanted to make things. And I, at the time, of course, thought I wanted to make celebrity-based things. It's like, what can I do with this Jackson 5 thing I got going? And luck has played a huge part in a career that's been, 40 plus years now. So has working really hard and putting in all those 10,000 hours, all that stuff Malcolm Gladwell talks about. It's all true. Yes. And I've taught for almost 35 years as well. And now in a position to run the department that I was part of so many years ago. And I'm still pushing the hard work thing, people. Like the luck, yes, but
Yes, the hard work has to come with it.
Yes. Yeah. And I've been so fortunate to have had mentors who were really pushing me in the right direction because I did not have an arty upbringing like some of my classmates. And so a lot of it was new to me and only what came to me through my high school art classes. And even for an academic school, what I got at Spelman in terms of the art ed stuff was really great. And so once again, I could have been in a high school program that was making ashtrays and, and there was a class for that. But I was like, I feel like I'm onto something. And but it's been a lot of work.
So in your 35 years of teaching, because I teach high school graphic design and I adjunct in graphic design, do you notice a difference between the students that have that fine art skill versus them just stepping into a design one class? Do you notice a big difference there?
Well, I feel like the kids that are coming in to SVA out of high school are having a fine arts background, are getting kind of what I got, probably the stepped up version of it. And our freshman year is is heavier in that than the other years. So for me, it was like, I don't want to do this when I was doing it foundation
Right.
year of like, why am I painting? Why am I like, I want to make stuff.
Yeah.
But I get it in
Right.
retrospect, the value of that and learning about art in a bigger way and the definition changing so much. Cause you think, oh, it's a bunch of paintings at the Met because we had to go to the Met every semester. I was like, oh God, through arms and armor and all this stuff. Like, oh, when will it end? But, it's much bigger than that and much cooler than that. So yeah, the fine arts background does make a difference and is something that I see that students are coming in with, which is great. Do you see it?
50. Because
Really?
I think because my school isn't an art school, it's just a regular university. So I'm getting those kids who are either trying to figure it out, want to see if this is what they want to do, but a lot of them are coming in because they are either in that weird space of like they need to make a degree. They're in that second year and they're trying to figure out like, well, I took a graphic design class in high school. Is it going to work? I don't know. Let me try it. So I'm 9 times out of 10. If I get those fine arts students, I'm like, hey, listen, fine arts guy, I got my associates, I got my BFA, I got my MFA. I love your guy. I said, come here. This is where I can show you how to digitally do this stuff and make your stuff awesome. But then I get those handful, which is like my 4 or 5 that are like, well, I came in as a business major. I came in as a history major. I don't know if I want to do that.
I wouldn't even know what to do with that. Like, I'm so used to like,
yeah,
they've come equipped and they're focused because they're coming to art school. So they've already made that decision. That's a really different challenge.
Yeah, it's just something that I think is newer because a lot of these kids are kind of like, I didn't go to an art school either, just like you. So I knew I came from a graffiti background. So I knew I wanted to do art. So it was just figuring out which art that would sustain me for longevity. So that's how I knew it. But a lot of these kids, they are just kind of, I don't know. I think schools aren't giving them that aptitude. Like, hey, are you good at this or that? They're kind of just like going into these programs and hoping for the best.
Were your parents supportive when you're like,
100%.
oh, I'm good to see? I'm lucky that I had that too. I think that for me, I'm first generation. My family's from Jamaica and they were just like, is it a college? Yeah. It's like, it's college. They're like, okay, that works for us. So they weren't like, well, you should, when it came time to high school, it was like, yeah, we're not doing this art thing yet. But with college, like, all right, she seems to be really into this and really wants to do it. Yeah. So I was lucky that they weren't like,
Yeah. Because see, for me, it was going from playing football and then getting to college. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And that's where it was very different being the only art guy in the whole football program, but also the only football guy in the whole art program. So that was very interesting to me. No, but they were very supportive. I think my parents being from the South and them being blue collar, I had to break it down to them. But my dad told me, he was like, listen, if you're going to do it 100%, don't half it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like that push where I was like, okay, cool, I can do it. And now they asked me, oh, you teach tonight? I was going to see if you wanted to come over. Like, so they know my schedule now.
Okay.
So it's a very beautiful thing. And
I was lucky that my parents lived long enough to see me succeed. Because that was, and to come to like an awards dinner, stuff like that they were like, oh, so it seems to have all worked out, like, yeah, it did. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So during your tenure time in education, how do you address portfolio reviews? How does that happen for you? Or how do you break that down? Because I've noticed on my end, some are very, they wear their emotions on their sleeve and it's like, this is a critical thing to help you. So I'm wondering, how do you address those issues in design?
Be more specific, because do you mean when they're coming in, when they're leaving the portfolio?
Both coming in and when they're leaving, because I feel like they stick to this one thing and they want to hold on to it. Like, oh, I want to do animation. And I'm like, well, you have to be able to do animation, typography, logo, color grading, color theory. And they're just like, no, I'm going to go work for Nickelodeon. And it's like, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. But if you can get in there, they're going to probably have you be an intern for a minute. So I feel like, how do you deal with those issues when they arise?
We have a portfolio review and they're submitting a PDF portfolio of, I forget now, 35 pages when they're a sophomore, 45 when they're a junior. including videos and stuff like that. And then when they're a senior, they have a portfolio class, and that portfolio instructor is going through the steps, and they produce whatever the instructor is asking at the end. But when I've got them submitting portfolios as sophomores and juniors, it's not everything you've done, just the greatest hits. And I want to see process. And that's increased more and more and will continue, especially as we go into this lovely world of AI and all that stuff. We're trying to get them sometimes to slow down and let us and do sketches, and let's do many, many versions of things. And not worry so much, especially when they're sophomores, about the end result. Like, we want you generating ideas. If you think you want to do X, like, I really want you to do a little bit of Y too, because you might change your mind.
Right.
And I don't want them to go down a lane and say, well, IXD because my friend said. And my friend said this. I'm like, no. I want you to figure out what you want to do based on sort of test driving stuff. And instead of just like my friend said, which is very big.
Gotcha.
So go in and make informed decisions about the classes that you're taking and the direction you're going. And really, but we kind of want them to really be Swiss Army knives early on and throughout, because this stuff is changing like daily now,
Right.
And you can't, when you're that green, you really can't be a specialist in the way that you think you want to yet. Like, this is twists and turns, especially in these coming years. So you're going to go in as a junior person, whether it's advertising or design, because I manage both departments. And, they're not really looking for your big jumbo ideas quite yet. You have to be able to learn to work with people. You have to figure out how to be helpful, how to continue learning, or you're going to be really disappointed because people are going to have you put together presentation decks and give you really small projects at first, even though you've just come out of art school with all your, your big bad self.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to get them to slow down and pop out lots and lots of ideas, just throw stuff at the wall.
Yes.
And because idea generation was so pen and paper for me a million years ago, and for them, it's like, but this looks good because I've just made it look. It's like, no, that's not really an idea. That's just sort of a version of the last one. And you just changed the color, or it all looks finished, and so it's hard. And then even going out there in the end, be sort of a generalist, because there's not a whole lot of jobs. So
no, it isn't.
What's your take on that?
It's very, I think it's a nurturing process.
Totally.
And so and I'm learning that because I didn't have it. I've had critiques where I was like, I just don't like it. Okay. No, nothing else. It just isn't working.
Well, so much more is expected of us as instructors now than before. You're like, oh, whatever the person says, that was it. And then for me, that person disappeared for a week until we saw them again. There was no contact in between classes and no email, nothing. They reappeared.
And you're asking your friends, hey, what do you think? Is it working here? Because that's what I've heard. Yeah.
And now, more is expected of us as educators to give better feedback and not emotional feedback and stuff that's really helpful and supportive and all that. And some of the drama that I witnessed, which was really fun at the time and sticks with me, young people won't put up with that today. Young people are different. So
they want to know why. You have to give them an answer.
And you're like,
and there's nothing wrong with questioning it. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I've learned that if you show proof, they're more likely to jump on board with it instead of being so apprehensive to it. What I tell them, I was like, you're going to hear a lot today. Get your sifter and just start shaking it. Some stuff is going to fall through. Some stuff you're going to keep. Yeah. I said, and the stuff you keep, that's what you need to make the adjustments for. I was like, because the way I tell them is like, you've been sitting with it for so long. This is your baby. But then you take your baby outside and you're like, oh, it needs its shots. It needs socks. It needs its hair. It needs a beanie on. Like, you don't know these things because you've been inside with it on your computer for so long. So something interesting you said is they need to be a Swiss Army knife. Yeah. And let's talk about you being a Swiss Army knife. So you've worked for Rolling Stone. You transitioned into Broadway advertising. So how did you adapt to these vast, different industries?
Well, I'll tell you, it's the reason why people don't do it, because it's really hard.
Yeah.
You know, you become a specialist and you just stay there because life is better that way. Every time I've made a big change, it's like, what was I thinking? You know, after the years of the magazine stuff and feeling like I had a good reputation, I can, be an art director at some great magazine
Yeah.
after all these many years with Fred at Rolling Stone. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that right now. Like, I kind of want to try something else. But the trying something else, going into the theater stuff, and they're like, and what did you do before? I'm like, really? I have to start over? And just, a whole different culture and a whole different world, luckily, because it was familiar in that I like theater and I like entertainment. So it wasn't like, what is that? What's that show? So that part was easier for me, certainly, than some of my designers who were not theater people at all,
Right.
but loved design and found a way in. It's really hard to make those big changes.
Yes.
Really hard. The good reputation you had doesn't mean that much to all these different people who were like, where'd you come from? So it wasn't like a world of editors who were like, oh yeah, I heard you worked here. This was just like, huh? And to enter a world where everybody in that case was so chummy and familiar, and they were very big huggers, and I wasn't. And I was like, why is everybody touching me like this? And it's like, oh, okay, it's like a family thing. It's like, hey. So that was different. But presenting to clients was so different than working with editors. And it would make me so nervous. And I couldn't find that language of how to sell something. I could talk about how cool it was and the design stuff, but it's like, actually, they don't want to hear about that. They want to hear about how this sells their show or what this does for them. And so those years were a huge education. And while it was difficult, certainly early on, it got easier. But I see why people don't make those changes, because those changes are hard, and even going from that to even working for a college that I went to school at SVA, that's in my blood, and being there as an employee and as a chair and looking at it from another angle, even different from the teaching angle. It's like, here we go, Gail, starting again, but now even older,
It's keeping your brain
but it's
fresh.
Good. Yeah. And while my design skills, some stuff has probably atrophied because I'm not in front of the computer doing the making part as much. And that frustrates me incredibly when I'm like, how do you do that again? How do you do that? Let me look at that. The other part of having had these amazing experiences and all this learning over the years, and that each of those places has given me the grace to do that learning. And it wasn't ever like, okay, like, what are we going to do? It's like, oh, you give me some time to figure this out. Thank you. So, but it's totally worth it,
So looking back at those like big projects you worked on, were there any of them that were like defining that you were like, okay, this is going to be my approach to design, or this is something I'm just going to carry throughout my whole career?
I don't know about that, but because I've cranked out so much stuff that it's like crank, next. So it's not, but there've been a few things, and one being getting to work on a postage stamp in 2012 that was released in 2013. That was something that it was unexpected, but something I'd always hoped for. And it's like, who does that? Who gets to do that? It's like, wait, I get to do that? That's really funny. Being so honored to do something so very tiny, and because I've done so many giant sized things, or things that are at least, don't need a magnifying glass for. So to do something that was tiny but so important was so cool. And that led to other good things happening. And that was, another avenue that was unexpected.
So can we talk about that? How did that happen? Did someone see your previous work? Or did you even know this was coming, or was it just out of the blue?
Rick Raffay, who was then president of AIGA, brought it up to me once that there was a Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee for the Postal Service. And he said, you'd actually be great on that committee. And it's like, I said, man, if you ever hear of an opening, I would do that. Like, yes. And then sort of out of the blue, one of the postal art directors, Antonio Alcala, contacted me and asked if I would work on this Emancipation Proclamation stamp. He left a message on my home voicemail I had left Spot at that time because my folks weren't well and my siblings and I were trying to figure out how to take care of them. And I got this call at sort of the time where I wasn't at my most confident and just feeling like, oh my God, my family stuff and all that. And Antonio, and I was like, what? Like, where are you? I'll come down to Washington tomorrow. Like, what do you want me to do? And he kept saying like, this is this great opportunity, but like, you can't tell anybody. And I was like, I can't tell anybody. And like, you can't, it's not 100% till it's done and it could get killed. So that's why also part of why you're not saying anything. And I was like, okay. So, but this stamp is scheduled and it actually is going to happen. So it's not like it's going to go on the back burner because there's an anniversary. You know, hopefully you're the person to do it. And the one thing is no words. I was like, what do you mean no words? No type? Like, what? It's like, that's what I do. So like, I'm not an illustrator. I'm not a photographer. And I'm like, uh-oh. It's like, okay, let me do some big thinking here. But the first thing I did was type because I was like, I've got to get that out of my system because that's what I do. And that was the one they ended up going with in the end. So I was lucky once again. And then that led to serving on the committee for 12 years. And I actually just finished my final term last week or the week before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
so
congratulations on such a long, glorious term.
Yes, it was 4 terms of 3 years. And I hit the maximum. And now I can go back to designing stamps. So it's like, okay, please, like, give me something cool to do. It doesn't have to be cool. Just give me something.
That's cool. That's fun. So were there any like key mentors or figures that helped you along the way? Like,
oh my goodness.
or that have heavily influenced your work?
Paula Scher. You know, Paula Scher was my portfolio teacher in school and she just started teaching. She was just 2 years in with our class and we were just dazzled. You know, anything she said, anything she did. Or like, we want to be her. And another instructor, Karen Goldberg, who passed away 2 years ago, same thing. We're just like, I want to be you. And so we had a couple of those instructors who, you know, we had it been this era with contact between classes and seeing them online, like we would have been just stalking them seriously. But because they all vanished into thin air after Tuesday night, they were just held in this really high esteem. And Fred Woodward, when I was at Rolling Stone, Lynn Staley, Ron Campisi, when I was at the Boston Globe. So I've had mentors at every stage who have been supportive, who have listened to my bullshit and let me go on and corrected me when I'm wrong, but not in a crappy way, and have celebrated the little successes here and there. So, and all who are still among the living, I'm still in touch with, you know.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And, you know, someone like Paula, she came and spoke at school last semester and she's going to be teaching again with us. So that's exciting. And through my career, anything that she said, like, here's what you should do. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. and from my first job, it's like, I think you should take it. And I was like, okay, I will. And then the next job. So I've had these sort of bossy women pushing me like, oh, so, and just wonderful. And having her come to speak last semester, you know, when I'm in this job and introducing her to the students, they were so like, oh my God, it's Paula Scher. And I'm like, that was my teacher. So, and then looking like, how old are you?
It's almost like a full circle moment right there. She goes from being the teacher to now you're introducing her to guest lecture for you. That's crazy. That had to be like a kind of like a pinch me moment right there where you're like, oh wow.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, anytime I'm with her and all these people, it's still a pinch me moment. Like, I can't believe I know these people. This is so nice. So, yeah.
So I'm just curious. So you had this glorious, phenomenal career in industry. So you go from a practitioner, now you're an educator with over 30 years in education. So what prompted you to transition from business to academia?
When my folks were sick, I thought, okay, let me freelance for a while. And so I can be more actively part of their care. And I had a little studio with a friend. We were renting a space in Chelsea and I was really enjoying working together, but at the same time felt a little too isolated. And I was still teaching. And that was the thing that kind of kept me tethered. And when my father died, I was like, okay, this kind of changes things a little bit now of what freed up, kind of some space freed up to do other stuff. And So I have my mother to deal with, but I was like, and as I was thinking, well, I feel like it's time for a change again. SVA contacted me, Tony Rhodes, who was at that time executive vice president, and asked if I wanted to run the design studio for the school. And he called, and we were friendly. We were friends, actually. And he called on a Friday and said, all right, so get back to me on Monday. Bye. I was like, wait, what? What? I remember, I was like, Tony.
Goodness.
And I went down to visit my mom. I was at my sister's. And it's like, I think I want to do this. It's like, oh, but I've got to talk to Joe. Or, we were working together. It's like, oh, this is really shitty of me to do this. But it just, like everything else for me, kind of came up out of nowhere. And I was like, and so I ended up like, I'll still get to do some work and we'll keep working together. But now my base will be school. And like, you should be teaching. So he started teaching. And I was running the studio, Visual Arts Press, and working with some really lovely people. And I was like, okay, like I'm good for a while now. All right, this is different and a little less stressful in some ways. And then Richard Wild, who was chair of BFA Design and BFA Advertising, was getting ready to retire after a 50-year career. So he'd been my chair when I was there. He was the only chair. And he said, I think that you should take over for me. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, oh, but I love working with Tony and doing this stuff. And Tony was the one who was like, you should do this. And so I was sort of mixed because like I kind of found my groove. I was like, I don't know if I'm looking for another challenge again. And then spoke to the president and all that. I was like, you know what? I got to do this because for all of these opportunities that seem like, oh my God, there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And like relearning or like going into something I don't know all that much about. It's like, am I going to look back and say, I should have done that? Why didn't I do that? And so I thought this was the same thing of like, you should just do this. And you're going to look back and say,
Right.
So I did it. And it was really hard, just like everything else. And then the pandemic. So I had one semester in person and then everything fell apart. So it's like, this is not the kind of challenge I was looking for. And so there was that.
So how did you adjust?
It's been a
during
bumpy
that time?
ride.
Oh, I believe it.
My goodness.
But how did you adjust for that pandemic hit?
I was up here in Woodstock with my friend Zapong, who was one of my students from years ago, and he's this fancy designer. And he was up for the weekend, and we just learned that, okay, we're going to shut down, for maybe a week or two. And I was like, Zapong, you should stay. Like, let's just see what happens. Stay up here with me for a week or two. 6 months later, Zapong's still there. And now Joe is here too, because we're working on projects. We were just here for the 6 months. And I spent like every waking moment on Zoom, whether with instructors or students. Those guys were so wonderful because they got on Zoom with kids. Because we had kids who had 5 roommates and then all of a sudden they were left in the apartment alone because everybody else went back to somewhere else. And they're like, no, I'm by myself. Or kids whose families were sick. It was crazy. But, faculty who I only knew for a short time, for some, and some I'd known for a long time, but I'm new in this position and I'm asking them to trust me. And I'm saying, here's this thing that you never knew how to use before, Canvas, that we all sort of resisted. And now we're all going to just dive right in. And we have to get better at this. And we have to figure out how to teach and multiple cameras. People were amazing. The faculty, they were so great. We would have faculty meetings on Zoom. We're like, okay, everybody. Sometimes like I have like 150 faculty. So it's a lot of people, but we would meet in small groups or some I never saw, but most were like, okay, we got this. It was like, thank you. Man. But, and then another like half a year goes by. It's like, I've been in this house for like a year and a half. And so, that was, I got me back on that one for making yet another change.
Right.
But it's been great. It's been a couple of years post-pandemic that I finally got my footing and I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Did you ever get your footing after that? And it seems like you have.
Yeah,
so
certainly
good.
Not during, but after.
Yeah.
And Zapong and Joe like to cook. And I'm like ready to heat up a lean cuisine, but they were cooking. And all we did, not Joe, but all Zapong and I did was gain weight. We just kept eating and eating and eating and eating. Of course, Zapong lost his. I just added to mine. But
I think everybody became a chef during that time. I did. Me and my wife, we just would go through Pinterest. We'd go on YouTube. We'd go through Instagram and TikTok, find meals and be like, we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Zapong was big on all these New York Times recipes and stuff he was seeing online. And
Yeah.
tonight I'm going to make, when I was like, and the afternoon I was like, Sue, what's for dinner tonight?
That's
Yeah.
funny.
So it was a magical and delicious time
Yeah.
in some ways. And then like, absolutely like, oh my God, in other ways.
Getting cabin fever, going stir crazy a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
so lucky, once again, that it wasn't me going stir crazy in my little itty bitty apartment, that I was up in the country,
Yeah.
so that was really nice.
Were you still creating on your own, like your typography and different things like that?
Yeah, because Joe and I were still doing projects. Sapong and I did a poster together for SVA. Yeah, we did a couple book covers. Yeah, because I was just like, I know, I got to do something. Yeah.
So with your passion for typography, what do you think makes type such a powerful tool in visual communication?
Because type can do the communicating all on its own, and that's what I love, that paired with an image or reacting to an image and all that. Absolutely. Yes. But when you can tell the story with just the way you've designed the words themselves, that's really magical. And even in the itty bitty stamp format, in the time that I've been on the committee in working with the art directors, because that's a lot of what I was doing, to be able to have those conversations about like, how do you say tap dance that feels like it's tapping, and that stuff is really exciting to me, even now. And there was some AI thing that one of my coworkers from VAP sent over, if it has like 10 million different special effects and turn type into fruit and turn type into this thing.
I showed my students that too. It's, I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yeah.
And I was like, look at that. Like, it's like so
that
easy to do this now. And
you type it in and you prompt it. You prompt it
You're
to what you want.
prompted to do that.
Yes.
And I think of doing all that in real life, and the magic that comes from the making, and the magic comes from changing your mind as you're doing something that I respect that that's out there, but I'm like, oh, shit, like, are the students going to be like, I want, type that looks like a lemon, and that's it? And like, oh no, I want you to have those moments of play.
The tactile.
Yeah, the tactile. And, how do we do that now?
It's interesting. I didn't learn, well, I shouldn't say I didn't learn. I wasn't aware of how much play happens within like design and work. It wasn't until I went to my master's where I had a professor. He gave us a book on play in your work, or play in design, or play in your design or work. And that's when I was like, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because it's part of that, almost peeling back these layers of like, you're almost there. And then you finally peel back that final piece and you're like, that's it. So yeah, play is huge. I try to push my students to understand that.
Yeah. And even when it's an intense subject, that you're like, there's no play here. Like, this is serious stuff. There still is in how we approach it as designers, that as communicators, that if you're like, even if you're not having fun and not like, haha, woo, kind of fun, but if it's not a pleasurable process doing this, like, you're not going to get a good result. Like, it's going to be that thing that you're like, oh boy. And we all have a lot of those, and I have a lot of those too that I'm not showing you, but we all have them, and then we move on. But if there's too many of those in a row, it just breaks your spirit,
Yeah. So now we're stepping into like your work being included in these like permanent collections, like oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name, the Library of Congress, the Cooper Hewitt collection. It's like, so how do you approach design as a medium for cultural storytelling?
I mean, those things are coming sometimes by way of the project and what they're looking for. And I love when that happens, when it's something that's bigger or richer or purposeful in a big way, that is less selling and more storytelling. I really enjoy that. And I feel like I'm good at that, where the selling part is still, I got it and I can do it, but where I really dig in is the storytelling part. I don't know how to answer that.
It's okay.
No, it's just, that's super important to me. Yeah, reframe the question. Let me try again.
Okay, no worries. It's been included in permanent institutions like the Cooper Hewitt and the Library of Congress. So how do you approach design as a medium for cultural storytelling?
So the work that's been collected, especially the work that's the museum in DC, the African American Museum in DC, they have most of it now.
Wow.
To the point where I gave them my Jackson 5 scrapbook. And so the stuff that they have is kind of silly stuff. There's some that's meaningful. There's some that's ridiculous, but it's what I do. And so the scrapbook was the one thing that I was like, well, maybe this needs a home, because I couldn't find it for years. And then when I was like, well, I actually still have this. It's like, I don't deserve to have this. Like, I should put this someplace safe. So now they've got it. And, I remember when the people came from the museum to get the work, because they had to pack it themselves and all that. I was like, really? It's like, I'll roll it up and send it to them. Like, no, we do this. And it was really cool to see this stuff that I think is just sometimes like stuff, like being carefully packed and sent off. It's like, wait, this stuff does have some other value.
Right.
When you combine it and make it a lump of Gail stuff, it's like, oh, this actually turns into something. And there's a show coming up that I'm part of at the Ford Foundation this March with Amos Kennedy and a bunch of other people. And so there's those kind of moments. There was a show at the museum in DC that I was part of that for some reason I just was like, and I never went to see it, that I was like, I shouldn't be part of this. And I foolishly was just like, no, Gail, I was having one of those low self-esteem months, I guess. And so I never, the work was there. And it's like, oh, I saw your work. I was like, oh, how did it look? And then now I'm like, I'm in DC all the time. Why didn't I go down there for the... So this Ford Foundation thing, I'm like, I'm in. What do you need? When's it opening? I'm coming. I'll get something to wear. So it's not ever seeing yourself as someone who's worthy of this sort of stuff. And so it's not like me being shy or whatever. It's just like, they want me. Well, the bar must be pretty freaking low. And that's not the case, but like, that's how you feel sometimes. So, and that's every now and then I'm in that slump of like, if they only knew the truth. But Ford Foundation is not going to be able to get rid of me, because I'm going to be like, what time do you open? So
you camp out for it. Just sit up there.
They're like, yeah, it's one piece. Let it go.
Yeah. So I'm interested. You said you fall into these slumps, right? But you've won some like really crazy accolades. I mean, the AIG Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah. So it's just like, how do these like honors like influence a designer's career? Like,
they're nice things they're nice bragging rights to have, but that's all. Like for us, when Paula was at school and some student was asking about being like, how does it feel to be this like really famous designer? And she was like, our world is so small. Like, yeah, I'm a famous designer. Because it's like being a famous dentist. It's like for all the dentists, there's a dentist who's like, ooh,
super
God,
famous.
he really does teeth. Yeah. And so it was like, yes. Like it keeps you, and that's what keeps you grounded, because you're just like, you know what? Like, we all know about this at SVA, and we all know about this in our design community, but separately, like if she's calling to get some repair guy to come to her house, nobody's like, oh my God, it's Paula Scher. We'll be there in a minute. So yeah, our design world is pretty small.
It really is.
That said, it really feels nice when something like that, when you get some acknowledgement, mid-career or later, that you're like, oh, thank you. So.
Okay. So now you're getting that acknowledgement, but I have to bring it back to this. Just like as a Black woman in a, historically underrepresented industry, what challenges have you faced? And do you see meaningful progress in diversity within design?
Definitely see progress, because
good.
I mean, my friend Richard Baker and I were at the Boston Globe, and we just felt like, are we here? Because and then I remember getting this minority contact list when I started, and I was like, what? And so it was this, for all the journalists, it was this well-intentioned, like, here are your people, and you can all get together and hang out or something. That's how, and I was like, these are my people. Like, so you've decided who my people are. And I was like, what? And like, do you like, I was just incensed. And I'm sure again that their hearts were in the right place and you help form your community, but it's like, what? And I remember Rich and I were just like, so, and then you immediately have like, that's why I'm here. And even when it's not, because of stuff like that, you just feel like, was I hired because
Right.
And I remember people saying like, oh, this must be so nice for you to be, outside the Bronx. And it's like, do you think I've never seen a house before? Or like I'm on my stoop, having a
Yeah.
cigarette. And I was like, listen. So they were all going there, which was to me a very white place. And I hadn't given it any thought. And then when I'm there, I had these weird experiences of like, oh, and I remember when early on at Rolling Stone of Do the Right Thing came out, and people were like, well, what do you think? I really want to know what you think of this. I was like, me? Like, oh. So, and every Black person has heard this happen. And as a very light-skinned Black person, oh my God, the things that I've heard people say that you're just like, wait, what?
Exactly that look you did. I've done that many a time where it's like you do a slow turn. You're like, what did you?
Huh?
What? Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that, this generation doesn't have to go through as much of that. And that I hope I was a bit of a pioneer for them, and those before me were the pioneers for me, and that they don't have to listen to people say ridiculous stuff and make assumptions about what your life is or was. And to, my sister, who's this brilliant professor, it was just always assumed, well, that's why you rose up through the ranks, and that's how you got your doctorate. That's how, like, are you kidding? She's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, that had, like, what? And her advisor, when she was doing her doctorate, was Black. And I remember, and she's just like, oh boy. So this is going to multiply even more because it's going to be assumed like, oh, well,
Yeah.
And so you don't realize, people, like, that's the kind of stuff we have to think about. And we all work 10 times harder because we don't want you to make any assumptions, And when other people say, well, I've experienced that too, it's like, well, this is like, no, you haven't. Yes, you've had your separate experience and all that, but this is rough,
Right.
and you won't believe what people say. And
because I don't think they even think it's coming out of their mouth. It just shoots out.
yeah. So, and even at this ripe old age, I can still go in a room and look around and say, is there another Black person? Am I the That's the stuff that we do of just, even, I don't need to know that person. I'm not going to go necessarily talk to them if I don't know them, but you're always just kind of checking to see, like, anybody else? Just me?
It kind of makes you feel a little bit safe if you see another one. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But, and I can't imagine if that's what it's still like for me after all these years, what it would have been like in the 60s and 70s and before. And I remember my dad talking about how hard it was to buy a car, or assumptions that were made about him. Like, oh man. And even when we moved to our house, that the neighbors put their garbage on our side of the street and did stuff like that. The neighbors that we shared the driveway with wouldn't come out if we were in the yard so like, I didn't have to experience that in the way that my parents did. And what the heck was that like? Like, oh, like, this is nothing compared to that. And seeing how for them that they're like, nope, we're here. Yep, we keep our house nice. We're the lawn, the little bit of lawn out there is trimmed, and the hedges, and you'll come around and you'll realize that we're just nice neighbors. And it took a long time, but they did. Not all, but it's like, okay, like, I'm going to work hard and mind my business too. Yeah.
So I'm curious now, do you see the numbers of Black students in your class increase or decrease, just out of curiosity?
It's up ever so slightly. It's always been pretty small numbers, and I'm noticing a few more students here and there, and so I'm just like, come talk to me, and let me keep an eye on you. And so I'm like, you know what? Like, I see you, so I'm not gonna like, oh,
you can't get away. You can't get
away. So they're like, oh shit, like, get away from my parents, and now I got her. So and I do, and I see them succeed, and I see them kind of cruise along, just doing their stuff. I'm like, yes.
I'm just curious, why do you think there's less numbers of us in design? You've been in it way longer than I have.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
certainly, that's why I'm curious.
Parents are like, are you going to get a job? Can you get a job doing this? Can you get a job doing this? So that was, for me, again, any hesitation about it was just like, can you make a living? And then when I was like, I can, they're like, okay. But, I've occasionally encountered parents who still ask that question now. It's like, no, it's very different now. Like your child will be fine.
Yeah.
Like this is a shitty time right now, just in the world, but in general, there's jobs, and what we do is much more respected, and people understand what it is certainly better than they did a million years ago for me. So school's expensive for everyone.
Yeah.
I think that we just have to, I work with the High School of Art and Design, and I'm on one of their curriculum advisory boards and for design. And I see that population is much, much more diverse. And it's like, I got to get those kids. I got to get those kids coming here. And if it's money, I've got to find a way to make that a little bit easier, which is really next to impossible. But there's interest, I feel like I'm seeing interest, but we got to
pull them, keep coming
yeah,
over, pull them.
And keep convincing the parents that like this is a viable direction for your kid.
Okay. Oh,
I mean,
thank you for that.
What do you see?
About 0 to 1. And in my mind, I was like, we are like, the one thing my mom told me, she was like, you will always be somebody, you will be better than you will be known better for rather than running a ball and catching it. She was like, you're going to be better than just like, black guy plays football. Got it. She was like, you're not going to be known for that. She made sure to like instill that in my head. Like you're going to be known outside of just being the athlete. You need to do something else. You need to make your name in some other spaces. And so I was like, wow.
Yeah. I like your mother.
I was the only kid born on the West Coast. Everybody else was born in Memphis. My dad is from Georgia. So it's like, I got the Southern upbringing in the West Coast. So that's how I was able to do it. So yes. So it's, I
want to be clear that even though I'm seeing more Black students, I'm seeing there are very few in general at any school, and so we've got to do a better job across the board.
Gotcha. Okay. So I've come across this statement, and it was, and I just want to see your take on it. It was from Eddie Opara. He said that designers don't solve problems. Instead, they address the current situations. Because that was a statement he said, and I was just wondering what was your take on it? Because I even shared it when I spoke with Eddie that I was raised on the design of you're a problem solver.
Yeah, me too, and I like that. I like the problem solving part, and some people definitely see it otherwise. Milton, what was Milton's thing? The moving from an existing state to a preferred state. Like that's it for me. Yeah. That's the problem solving I'm talking about. It's like, yes, of course, Milton summed it up in one sentence, but okay. And I love it's like, okay, let me pick apart this problem and then dissect it to death with somebody else, and then so. But yeah, I'm gonna steal what Eddie said, because that sounds better.
Yes, he's a delight. I talked to him during this conversation I'm having with designers, because it's just, I think it's so fruitful and filling for me being a designer and finding these people. So that's why I was like, I want to see what your take is on it, since you've been doing it just as long.
There have been times where dates back quite a bit, that being invited to something and we would joke, it's like, well, did you get Eddie? Like, it's get Eddie or Gail. And we're just like, yes. So we represent. It's like, no, this one's yours. Yeah, you do it. But he's so cool, and he does such great work. And he's got that nice accent.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal man.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you juggling being a designer, a writer, an educator, and an advisor. So how do you balance like all these roles on top of still doing still creating, still making pieces of work?
The you part suffers for the other, and the you part comes last. And it shouldn't, certainly not at this stage, but it shouldn't, and it does, because it's like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. I like being busy, so there's that. And that said, the times when I've kind of had to shift, when I was working at Spot, the Rolling Stone years were work all night, that we just worked and worked and worked, and then you crashed and took time off, and then you started again and did another issue. With Spot, at around 6, people were like, all right, see you tomorrow. And I was like, wait, what? Where are you going? Like, we're just getting started. So I had to learn, to kind of do stuff in fairly regular hours. And that was such an epiphany. So I was like, wait, now I have time? It's not dark? Like, what? And I can do stuff? And then I just started to fill that time with more stuff, you know, and it should have been me stuff.
Right.
Instead, it was like, I have time to write now. I have time to teach. And so that's what I haven't been good at, is carving out the time to, go out on a hike or do whatever. I'll just keep working. And there are times when I'm like, oh my God, there's so much that now I'm kind of trapped because I've got to finish this, start that, go back to that. But I love it, and I love being really busy. So I have to own that.
Okay. So
a little less busy would probably be a good thing.
Yeah. So this question is kind of like a fun one I threw in. If you had unlimited resources and no restrictions, what would you change about the design education or the industry as a whole? So you can choose education or industry, or if you want to knock them both down, go for it.
I would make art school affordable. I would make it less of a lifetime commitment to repaying student loans than it is. And, I did that too, but my loans were so small, even if you use the inflation calculator compared to what people have now. And I was able to knock them out early on at spot in my 30s, and I see people who are still paying them in their 50s. And it's like, oh my goodness. Wow.
That's me.
Ah, that's crazy. If I could use all that fake cash that you're offering me, I would try to do that.
So what about the industry? If you could change anything?
I always thought, when I win the lottery, which has never actually happened, but I was going to open this big workspace, in the West Village towards the water. I had it all in my head, with these winnings of that we were going to have, and we just, whoever wanted to come, we would have this sort of collective where we were doing good work, that we had this money to figure out how to get rid of in some ways, and that we were doing this work, and I was using my lottery winnings to pay the people working there to do this. And that we had this studio, this agency, this whatever of come here, and in this space, we're going to have all these great interns who are the people that we've been teaching. And that it was just going to be this, I got to be there at some point in my career space. That, I spent a year at this place, this think tank, this whatever, where we were all focused on doing sort of this community-based work. Or maybe we go national, maybe we go international. And so that's always been a bit of a dream with those imaginary lottery winnings.
Yes. So you said, I've heard it many a time from many designers, good work. What does that definition mean to you for good work?
The good work part is, for me, the something that's making a positive impact. The cool work, the stuff that I love, that, that you've done a project that you can actually look back at it a year later and be like, ooh, I like that. Because you can never look at anything right after the fact. So all you see are the mistakes, but at least go back a year. But the good work is the stuff that I don't get to do often enough. And I hope in my retirement years that I'm doing that more, that I can focus on okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and do something great for someone that is going to make either a tiny impact on their store or their whatever their business is. So the good is like a little cartoon halo kind of good for me.
Gotcha.
And then the good work, quality wise, again, is anything that I can look at a year later and not be like, what was I thinking? So, and even better to look back 10 years later and more, and to see stuff that wasn't too trendy. It wasn't like, oh, that looked like the 90s or whatever. And because I see that now, there was this wave of all this really groovy type these last couple of years that the students are using that I love. So it's eye candy to me, but it sometimes is masquerading for not actually having an idea and just sort of making this groovy thing. And I know how attracted I am to that. And Steve Howell and I did a book about that stuff. We actually had given the students. So I'm seeing the results of that. And so that kind of good, it's like, well, is this really this good? that quality level of good. It's like, no, this is just kind of cool and fun, but are you going to look back in 20 years and be like, oh yeah, that was that trend, And I look back on stuff when David Carson was doing Beach Culture and Ray Gun and those magazines. And then I just started teaching around then, and all the students were doing all this stuff all layered up and grungy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, like, don't do that. Don't do that. That's someone else's thing. Like, find your own thing. So yeah, good. Those are the many definitions for me. But the good with the cartoon halo is the one that I'm hoping to spend more time with, down the road a bit.
So how do you instruct your students to step away from copying or reimagining something that's already been done? What is your best advice for them for that? Yeah.
I got to go now. See ya. That's a hard one. I mean, that's what we did. Even we were anything Paul did, we're like, I'll do mine just like that. But now it's so easy to kind of swipe something and call it your own, or to make little changes and call it your own. And that's been a hard conversation. Not that frequently, thank God, but occasionally, where it's like that's not really yours.
Right.
And I know you made a couple little tweaks, but and now, so there's that. And then the AI stuff coming up is the students aren't that interested right now, design wise.
Mm-hmm.
They are sort of chat GPT wise, but I see this stuff, just like the pretty type and all that, there's like a logo generator and stuff like that, like, what?
Yeah. You type it in and it'll pop up quick. Yeah.
And, do you want those clients anyway who are satisfied with the thing that's generated? Those are the clients who are going to pay you 10 cents anyways. There's that. But it's a little too democratic for me. Like, no, design shouldn't be like that. And certainly early on with the Mac and early Quark and all that, when anybody could do their newsletter, you're just like, oh, no. Let a designer do that. And it's like, here's why. And that type is leaping over that photo, and that shouldn't be the case. So that was that. They're like, okay, they'll give up after a while. But with the AA part, they don't have to give up. They can just keep prompting for more and more and more. And that, oof.
The AI part, I haven't shied away from it. I've kind of more or less embraced it and try to navigate students to use it as a brainstorming tool rather than...
And that's, we're trying to as well, but it's really tempting.
To copy it.
Sometimes, yeah. And I totally get it.
I honestly, I've told the students, I was like, AI isn't 100%, but it gives you enough that it can put you on the right path. And I've told some students, I was like, unless you're a master prompter, your images are going to be trash. And I was like, and no one here knows how to prompt. No one has figured this AI thing out to get it exactly where you want a hand holding an olive branch and it's not 13 fingers. It's not like that. So I was like, until you can figure that out, it's not going to be perfect. But using it as a tool, I see as more of as brainstorming, because it was like before AI, even for me, I'm 37. Before AI, I had to go into books. I had to literally go to museums, like just to go, like just get outside, because it was like I didn't know any crazy design stuff. So it was just like I had to go out, and now everything is literally a Google away. So that's why I'm very much like, I've embraced it, but with caution, I should say.
Yeah. And again, luckily the students are shying away from it for designing itself. But every now and then there's someone who's like, I know the assignment was this, but I tried this. And isn't this cool? Like, yes, but it's actually not what I asked for.
We're looking for.
Yeah. But I know it's like this shiny object that you're like, well, that's kind of nice. But luckily there's still enough that we can see that's like, yeah, we know this is kind of AI.
Yeah.
So like, but like 5 years from now, 2 years, 1 year from now, like,
you won't be able to tell. But I've noticed I've gotten that more with non-fine art students. Like if I get the fine art students, they kind of shy away from the AI part. But if I get the ones who are non-art students and they're trying to figure out if they want to do design, I see more AI coming from them.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you said that most of your design students aren't even flirting with it, but I'm getting kind of like that 4 to 5 students that are very much like, well, let me see what this can do, or what can this bring me? Yeah.
They're using ChatGPT a lot. They want that.
And Adobe has their own AI too.
Yeah.
So they're using those two to get their stuff. So I've noticed that a lot.
So it's the constant question of how much should you be able to do on your own versus how much in a few years will you actually need to do on your own. So you should be embracing this. And I know that I don't even sit down with a notebook as much as I used to plan something, to sketch, because you just sort of go right to your laptop and start sketching. I can't be like, well, could be a stick in the mud about some stuff. But the writing, it's like, oh, I want you to feel comfortable writing and not lean on this quite as much. And I want you to become a good communicator. And being able to kind of form a thought and document it is part of it. And yes, you'll be using it for your emails and for polishing and whatever down the road. But while you're in school, just
hold on. Just give yourself a little grace to learn it and you'll feel better about it. I'm a stickler for sketches though. I think that was drilled into me in art.
Oh, it was totally drilled into me, but I don't even know anymore. We all say it. We all ask for it. When they do it, they're like, this is kind of liberating, but their instinct isn't to, it's to just start moving stuff around.
Here's those 10 sketches you wanted.
Yeah.
Through AI.
Yes. But no, even if it's not AI, to just go right to the laptop, to start working right to the computer, and not to have that moment kind of curled up on a chair where you're just sort of thinking and doing something by hand, which is that's really fun,
Yeah.
And I hate that you don't, that's not built in like it used
anymore. To be. Yeah. Yes. So Miss Gail, we are rolling and I am enjoying our conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I have one more question for you. For young designers entering the field today, what is one piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you were starting out?
This is the opposite of what you want probably, but take a break. Take a break. I wish I didn't have the money to go and go to Europe after I graduated or any of that stuff like people did. But I, even early on, was so focused on the work that the idea of taking time off was just no, I love doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. Vacation days. Okay. Yeah, whatever. But I see now as an older person and as finally taking a moment here and there to just be somewhere else and see how inspiring that is. Who knew that all this good and all this inspiration came out of being in Italy or being in California or being in New Hampshire or something's in driving distance.
Yeah.
I was just I'm going to sort of lose time somehow if I'm not always making something or always working, but it's the opposite. That is good for your soul, Who knew?
Right.
So I would say to a young person, seriously, those 10,000 hours really count, but every now and then, see someplace you haven't seen before, and it doesn't have to be going to Italy, but it could be just going across the state line someplace else or going outside.
Yes.
And coming up here for me, I never really appreciated until during the pandemic when I was here all the time. And it was is that a mountain? I was oh,
yeah.
Look at that sunset. What? So yeah, to just take a breath and enjoy it a little bit.
Yes. Yes. Well, you guys
if you told me that, I would have been no.
Fat chance.
I'm busy. I got stuff to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all right, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. My name is Justin Robinson. I had the great, legendary, even though she doesn't like to be called it, Gail Anderson on today.
Legend equals old, just so you know. At a certain age, all you hear is old. So,
but your work and accolades speak for themselves. So that's why you're a living legend. So you guys,
old living legend. It's
nobody
old
said old.
Goodbye.
You guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Okay. Bye.